From corrosion control to material science, the next frontier. There is something important happening within the Cathodic Protection Network blockchain, and it goes far beyond learning how to inspect a pipeline or operate a cathodic protection system. We are developing a body of knowledge that connects corrosion science, materials science, energy, engineering, and the recovery of valuable materials. And if you are a corrosion engineer, a corrosion scientist, or somebody who wants to work at the forefront of this field, you need to understand where this is going on. The Alexander cell is an important part of the development because it gives us a practical way of investigating the corrosion reaction itself. It moves us away from simply assuming that corrosion has been controlled and towards measuring what is actually happening. But the Alexander cell is only one part of the picture. The larger question is, what happens when we understand materials well enough to control their entire life cycle, from manufacture through service, corrosion and degradation to recovery and reuse? That is where materials science becomes extremely important. Materials science is fundamental to pipeline coatings, corrosion control and the protection of infrastructure. The objective is to understand the material, understand its electrical and chemical behaviour, and develop systems that provide the highest possible degree of electrical insulation and protection. This is not simply about putting a coating onto a pipeline. It is about understanding the material itself. It is about understanding what happens at the interface between the coating, the metal and the environment. It is about understanding how materials behave over decades of service and how we measure, predict and ultimately control these processes. That is the level at which Cathodic Protection Network blockchain intends to operate, and in fact is operating now. We are also developing relationships and formal cooperation, including our Memorandum of Understanding that we have with Iran, because this work cannot be developed in isolation. The future of corrosion science requires engineers, scientists, academics, manufacturers and researchers to work together and exchange knowledge. And this brings us to another enormous opportunity: resource recovery. The world has spent decades extracting minerals, refining materials and putting enormous quantities of energy into the manufacturing infrastructure. Rare earth elements and other valuable materials have already entered the global industrial system through mining, processing and manufacturing. The question for the future is not simply where can we find more? The question is, how do we recover what we have already extracted? Old infrastructure, industrial equipment, offshore installations, pipelines, tubing and other engineering structures contain materials that have already required enormous amounts of energy and resources to produce. When an offshore rig reaches the end of its operational life, we should not think of it simply as waste. We should ask what materials are still present, what can be recovered, what can be recycled, and how much of the energy originally invested in the production of those materials can effectively be preserved through recovery and reuse. The same principle applies to pipelines and tubing. Corrosion science gives us the knowledge to understand what has happened to the material during its service life. Material science helps us to understand what remains. Engineering allows us to determine how that material can be recovered, processed, and potentially returned to productive use. This creates an entirely different way of looking at infrastructure. We stop seeing old pipelines as simply something that has reached the end of its life. We start seeing it as a repository of materials, engineering knowledge, and embodied energy. That represents an enormous potential opportunity. But recovering that value requires real scientists and real engineers. It requires people who understand corrosion, people who understand cathodic protection, people who understand materials, people who can measure, people who can analyse data, and the people who can connect the science to an economic opportunity. That is why the education programme of the Cathodic Protection Network is different. We are not interested in simply producing another certificate. We want to develop people who can understand the science sufficiently to investigate problems for themselves and develop new solutions. The knowledge being developed through the network includes corrosion control, the Alexander cell, DCVG, CIPS, material science, corrosion measurement, data analysis, and the wider scientific principles that connect these subjects. And we are continuing to publish and develop this work through our online platforms, our courses, our Patreon community, our research program, and our international network. Some of the work we are developing may challenge conventional assumptions. That is exactly why it needs to be examined scientifically. If you believe we are wrong, simply don't say so. Measure it, test it, produce the evidence. That is how science progresses. The purpose of the Cathodic Protection Network blockchain is to give engineers and scientists the knowledge and practical tools to do exactly that. And this is where the Alexander cell becomes so important. If you want to understand the principles we are teaching, you need to be able to work with this device, understand its measurements, and develop your own practical experience. The course provides the knowledge. The Alexander cell provides the practical measurement. The research provides the opportunity to investigate. And the network provides the community in which that knowledge can be shared and developed. This is why we want our coordinators and members to take this seriously. Don't just watch the videos, don't just read the information. Learn it, take it into yourself, question it, test it, use the instruments, use your own instruments, build your knowledge, and then ask yourself what you can do with that knowledge. because there is a very large economic opportunity emerging from the combination of corrosion science, material science and resource recovery. The world has already invested enormous amounts of money, materials and energy into its infrastructure. The next generation of engineers has the opportunity to help to recover some of that value. That includes materials contained within pipelines, tubing, offshore structures and potentially the embodied energy that went into producing and constructing them. But somebody has to develop the science that makes this possible. That is the opportunity in front of us. We have built a foundation of knowledge. We have developed instruments. We have accumulated historical data. We have established international contacts and cooperation. We have an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, on this matter. We have courses. We have the Patreon knowledge transfer system. And we are continuing to publish our work so that other engineers and scientists can examine it. Now it is up to you. If you want to be part of this development, you cannot remain a spectator. Follow Cathodic Protection Network blockchain. Join the Patreon grouping. Study the courses. Learn how to use the Alexander cell. Ask questions. Work with data. And start thinking beyond corrosion control alone. Think about materials. Think about recovery and recycling. Think about the infrastructure. Think about energy. Think about what happens to the enormous investment that has already been made in the physical world. Because the future of science may not simply be about preventing materials from being destroyed. It may also be about understanding those materials well enough to recover their value when their original service life is finished. That is the direction in which we are moving. And if you want to be part of it, now is the time to get involved. Follow the links to the Cathodic Protection Network on Patreon and become part of the knowledge transfer program. The information is being published. The courses are available. The research is continuing. The instruments are available. The opportunity is there. What you do with it is up to you. Subscribe and thumbs up as a starter. Thank you for listening.